Welcome to the overview of continuing education rules for ABN Approved Providers of CE, Session 2 of 3. Once again, I'm Carolyn Morgan, the Nurse Consultant for Practice and Continuing Education for the Alabama Board of Nursing. In this session, we're going to answer the question, what am I responsible for as the Program Director or Contact Person for an Approved Provider of CE? At the end of the session, you're going to be able to locate the section on the website with specific rules and other information for approved continuing education providers. You're going to be able to list the policies needed by an approved provider reflecting responsibility of the contact person or program director. Once again, we encourage you to sign up for the CE provider email list. It is free. It's the way that we send you updates of rules and other information that we need to get to you. We will not flood your computer with a lot of emails, but the ones that we do send will be very important. Go to our website, www.abn.alabama.gov. On the title bar, click on Continuing Education. Then click on Approved ABN CE Providers. And if you forget, you've got my name and phone number there to the right, as well as the name and phone number of Vanessa Mathis, our administrative assistant. Then you're going to click on Subscribe or Unsubscribe to the CE email listserv. And then you will add your name and your email address and hit Subscribe. If at any time you want to unsubscribe, you can come back and fill in that section. Now, I would like to encourage you, after we show you how to get to the application, for you to pause the program and print the application for continued approval as a CE provider, because we're going to use that as a basis for our talk. First of all, go again to the title bar on our website. Click on Continuing Education. Click on, again, Approved Providers of ABN CE Providers. Then click on ABN Provider Application. And you will see it there. Pick the one in the middle, the continued application, and then print it off. And then we will begin. Okay. We're going to look first at the qualifications and standards for board-approved providers. The applicant must submit the required fee and a complete application. These have to come in at the same time. The fee must be correct, and we need a current application. Upon approval, I want to go ahead and tell you this so that it'll make a little bit more sense as we go through the policies. The approved providers issued several items, one of which is the ABNP number with an expiration date. The ABNP number has those 4 letters plus 4 digits that are unique to each provider. That's the way you're identified. The expiration date will be 4 years from the date of approval. You will also be loaned a tricorder to electronically transmit data, as well as the DVD to load the software to enable that to occur, and some directions. Let's look at the provider applications. There are 3 different types of applications, and I bring this up because you may be considering becoming a provider, and in that case you would use the initial application. Those that are already continued providers would use the continued approval, and those people whose number has lapsed will use the reinstatement application. Providers should use the most current version of the application located on the ABN website. Now, if you use the one, you load it down this month in July, and your application is not due until September, that will be fine. We've had some folks that have found an application somewhere that was about 10 or 12 years old, and we certainly ask for different information these days, and we will return it to you. The application must be complete. Be sure you answer all the questions. If you don't, we'll send it back to you with some additional directions. The application is divided into 4 sections: demographic information, organization and administration, policies and procedures, and continuing education. Demographic information asks for the name of the provider, the phone number with area code, the physical and mailing addresses, and the website address. We ask for the name and identity of the contact person of the program director, that is the person responsible for the ABN provider number and the classes offered. In addition to the name, of course, we need the phone number if it's different, the physical address if it's different. If the program director or contact person is a nurse, we would like your nursing license number and the state of licensure. We need also an email address and fax number. Remember that when the program director is not a registered nurse, there shall be evidence of consultation by a registered nurse. So if you're not a registered nurse, we ask for you to identify your nurse consultant by name, phone number, physical address, license number and state of licensure, email address, and fax. We need to know the record keeper or the individual responsible for record keeping. Many times this will enable us to call this person and save you that phone call. Again, we need the information listed there on this person. We need to know the administrator of the agency or the facility with the information there. Now, we ask you to be sure and keep your demographic information updated. There is a change in information form on the ABN website under, again, the applications. You go to Continuing Education title bar, go to ABN Approved Providers, look under there for Applications, and it is listed right there for you where you can download it in either Word or PDF and keep us updated. Let's look at Part B, Organization and Administration. First thing we ask for is the mission statement of the education unit. Many times we get the mission statement of the larger facility or agency. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for the mission statement of the education unit. We are asking for the organizational structure, including the location of the education unit within a larger organization. For example, this shows you what someone sent me, of course without identifying information on there, and I cannot tell, as I don't think you can, where the education unit fits. This is where it was sent back, and they sent me another one, and of course here I can clearly tell that the continuing education unit answers to the Director of Clinical Services, who then answers to the administrator. We need each unit's objectives for continuing education. We want to know how the education unit evaluates each objective, the time frame, and the individual responsible. Now, a lot of folks think that we're talking about course objectives. We're not. We're talking about your overall education objectives for the education unit. For example, someone sent in, all licensed staff members will obtain a minimum of 12 continuing education contact hours per year. Well, this is more an objective of what the staff members will obtain. We asked them to consider rewarding, and they did. Now it is an acceptable unit objective. A sufficient number of courses will be offered by the agency to enable licensed staff to meet their continuing education requirements. Some other examples of unit objectives, and certainly these are not things that you need to put in there, but it just gives you an idea. Identify learning needs and changing nursing practices and present programs to keep nurses up to date. Number 2, to continue to improve the variety, quality, and delivery of programs. And number 3, to assist nurses in remaining up to date on laws, rules, and regulation in the nursing field. Now we give you a sample of a chart that you can use, although it's not mandatory to use the chart, but we do need all the information. If you put, for instance, your unit objective is identify learning needs and changing nursing practices, tell us how often you're going to evaluate that to see that you've done that. And it's up to you how often you do this. This particular provider said they would do this quarterly. The person responsible would be the education coordinator. They were going to use as their tools and how they were going to do this, look at needs assessment with managers and staff to see if they got the new learning needs that were needed. They were going to monitor course evaluations for future class recommendations. You don't have to rewrite unit objectives if you don't want to. You can put number 3 or whatever number it is. Again, tell us the time frame, person responsible, and what evaluation tools you're going to use to make sure that you meet that objective. Reminder that the program director is defined as the person that is accountable for the quality, accuracy, and veracity of the continuing education provided. The program director is responsible for ensuring the instructors possess qualifications appropriate to the content of the activity. We ask you to give us the roles and responsibilities of the program director. Some of the things that you could submit to us for this would be to tell us what qualifies the director for the position. Does the job description reflect CE responsibilities? If the program director is not an RN, we ask for evidence of consultation to facilitate the planning, development, and evaluation of CE in nursing. Consider telling us, how is consultation accomplished? Do you meet regularly? Do you email? Do you fax? Do you talk over the phone? How does the nurse consultant participate in the process? Now let's look at Part C, Policies and Procedures. First one is the policy for the process for assessment and planning for CE for nurses. Include, how is it determined that a class or program is needed? Who participates in the assessment and planning process? You may have a committee. You may do it yourself. Just let us know. Second policy is for approval process for approving CE courses, classes, and programs. Include what documents are sent in to get a class approved. Let's say there's somebody in your intensive care unit that wants to do a program on ventilators. Well, what documents do they need to send in to you? Who reviews these documents and gives approval for the course? In policy development, remember that a course cannot be repeated for contact hours within an earning period. And this is one of the more frequent things that I call you about when we do audits of licensees. To avoid this, consider assigning a different name, if indeed the courses are different. If it's an BLS or ACLS course, consider putting if it's an initial or a renewal course, and that will save us some phone calls. We need a policy on how you select instructors and verify their competence. Again, consider including who selects the faculty for the courses and how is competency to present determined or verified. Advertising guidelines. We ask you to identify what type of advertisement do you do? What type of media do you use? Who do you distribute your advertising to? Is it just to staff? Is it to non-staff? And then there's a board rule that says that the board-assigned provider number and expiration date of board approval shall be listed on course announcements, certificates, records, and reports. So it's very important that you include that the board-assigned provider number and expiration date is included and that you actually do this. When I look at brochures that come to us for posting on our website or brochures that come to me in the mail, that's one of the first things that I look for. Did they include the board-assigned provider number and expiration date? As we talked earlier, the ABN does not approve courses, and this was one that was found in one of the advertisements. The course was approved by the Alabama Board of Nursing for 4.2 contact hours. That is incorrect. A way to reword that and make it appropriate would be the approved provider of continuing education by the Alabama Board of Nursing, ABNP, with the 4 digits, expiration date with the month, the date, and the year. This is very important to have on all your documentation, including when you communicate with the board. One of the policies that we ask for that is not required in rule is fee assessment with refund guidelines if applicable. Now we ask this because this is one of the phone calls we get frequently, and you know that if money's involved, people get real upset, particularly if they couldn't go to a program and they want their money back. So consider in your policy telling us that you charge any fees, or if you do or you don't, how you collect your fees, cash, credit card, check. This is exactly what you're going to tell the people that are your participants. And if you do give refunds, and if you do, what is the time frame and the parameters? What must they do to get that refund? Because if they call us, we're going to refer them back to you and to your policies. Awarding of contact hours is another policy that's very important. The unit of measure for ABN approved providers is 1 contact hour equals 50 minutes. In your policy, you need to tell us what your unit is going to be. You need to tell us whether license cards have to be available for swiping for contact hours to be awarded, or if you're willing to manually enter their hours for them. This is your choice, but it needs to be in your policy. We need to know if you're going to be sure and adhere to the policy that contact hours do not include breaks and lunch, unless, of course, you have a speaker at lunch. We want to know what you're going to do about late arrivals or those who leave early. Are they going to get the same number of contact hours as those who stay for the entire program? Do remember when you're doing your policy development, passing of a course or class evaluation tool, a test, is not a condition of awarding contact hours by the Nurse Practice Act. Okay, now passing, this can be 2 different things, obtaining CE and competency. To obtain CE, they don't have to pass the test. But if your facility or agency wants them to be competent, they say they have to pass the test. Well, that's another issue. But to obtain CE, they do not have to pass a test. How does a contact hour relate to a continuing education unit? They certainly are different. A continuing education unit doesn't equal a contact hour, and a contact hour doesn't equal a continuing education unit or a CEU. 1 contact hour equals 0.1 of a continuing education unit or CEU. One of the things that you agree to do as an approved provider and that the nurses love is electronic submission of records to the ABN. This is where you use the tricorder that we're going to talk about in session 3. In your policy, we need you to include the time frame for submitting to the ABN after course completion. And this time frame is strictly up to you. I would encourage you, though, to give yourself enough time so that if something happens, whether it's Christmas holidays, whether it's an illness or something like that, that you haven't tied yourself into something that cannot be completed. Some folks say within 24 hours, others say 72 hours, 2 weeks of the program. That is your call. We also need to know the person or the job title who's responsible for this electronic transmission. Generally, your record keeper would be this person. Now, realize that participants cannot enter contact hours by ABN approved providers on their individual CE records. In fact, they get in trouble with the board if they do this. An approved provider should not verbalize or include any version of the following that you see there in the advertisement, as has been done. They had said the participant is responsible for documenting contact hours on their ABN CE record. And then they proceeded to tell them how they were to do this. If you are an approved provider, you must electronically transmit the hours. This is where we want a policy on how you evaluate your classes or your courses or programs that are offered for CE. In your policy, we want you to include, or in the packet, the document that you use to evaluate, the person that's responsible for tallying the results, and how you handle negative comments, particularly on anything other than the room was too hot or too cold. We know that they're always going to comment on that. Your records and report maintenance policies should include retention of records. Be aware that the rule says that records and reports shall be maintained for a minimum of 4 years. We also ask for your plan for disposition of records in the event of demise of the facility or agency, or if you choose to retire your provider number, because again, they still must be kept for 4 years. Now let's go to Part D, Continuing Education. And this particular one is for continued providers, so initial and reinstatement providers would not have this particular question. But we ask you, how many activities did you sponsor for the past 4 years? And a source that you can use is the provider class listing. We'll go over this in session 3. This also is an excellent tool for you to be able to tell your administrator not only how many classes, but how many nurses were involved, how many RNs, how many LPNs, and that kind of thing. It's a very important tool. All right. This is where they're just a little bit different. If you're an initial submitter to be a provider, we ask you to submit 2 examples of an outline with information requested for non-standardized national programs that you plan to do during the first 6 to 12 months of approval. Same thing if you're reinstating, but if you're if you are applying to be a continued provider, we ask you to submit the information for 3 most recent non-standardized courses that you've presented. What we're looking for is the information that is here, in addition to some others, but we want to know the objectives for the class, the content that goes with the objective, the time frame in minutes, who presented the program, and what was their teaching method. Was it PowerPoint, lecture? What was it? We also need a statement of need for the course, the instructor qualifications to present the course, requirements for satisfactory course completion, and we need a summary of the participants' evaluations. We don't want all the copies of their evaluations. We want a summary. You need to enclose the application with the appropriate non-refundable fee. Now, when do you need to send the application in? If you're an initial or reinstating, we'd ask you to send it in 4 to 6 weeks prior to the proposed first class. If you're asking to be a continued provider of CE, we ask you to send it in, again, 4 to 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. This gives us time to review it, because we do read it, and to get back with you with any other additional information or clarifications that we may need. That way your approval is not interrupted. Upon approval, again, you're going to be issued an ABN number with an expiration date to put on your advertisements and all your communication with us, password for your provider online class records, a tricorder after the affidavit is signed and returned, because this is an item that is loaned to you for the duration of your providership, and you'll be given some provider cards that identify your class as yours. Reminder, the ABNP number has ABNP plus the 4 digits. It's non-transferable, and it should be on all course announcements, certificates, reports, and records, including emails to the board. Many times we get emails and it takes us quite a long time to figure out who this person is and what provider they belong to. You will be given a password. The original is assigned by the ABN or by the computer, and this will help you get into your provider class listing. You can change your provider name, but we ask you, if you do that, to please notify us in an email. And that's just so that we can be better equipped to assist you. If you call us and ask us about some classes or some trouble that you're having, we need to be able to pull up your provider class listing. And if we don't have the password, we can't help you as much. The tricorder is loaned upon approval and after the affidavit is signed and returned. The tricorder will remain the property of the Alabama Board of Nursing, and upon retirement of the provider number, the tricorder has to be returned or money's paid for it. Some facilities and providers want to get additional tricorders, and they certainly can do that and can purchase those. And we'll tell you how to do that in the next session. You will need that provider card. It's very similar to our license cards, that you will identify the classes being offered by your number when you swipe them with your tricorder. And you can also get additional provider cards at no charge if you just let us know how many you need. Remember that lapsed or retired board providers shall not offer continuing education as an approved board provider. To avoid the lapse status, we want you to send the application 4 to 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. Other issues that we'd like to bring up to you. When is a number retired? You've heard me say that a number of times. It's on request of an authorized entity. Upon failure of an authorized entity to request continued approval. In other words, your lapse date came, we've not heard from you, so we will retire your provider number. And then when the board denies or withdraws approval. If you choose to retire, the retirement form should be completed. It was right underneath the change of information form. You must return the tricorder or send us money. You must maintain records for 4 years, and you also need to maintain the software in your computer for 2 license renewal cycles or 4 years in case corrections need to be made. Again, let's remember how to go sign up for the CE listserv. When is the number withdrawn? If the provider fails to adhere to the requirements in these rules, including but not limited to lack of qualified personnel for planning and conducting CE for nurses, inadequate record maintenance, fraud, deception, or misrepresentation related to the educational program, failure to comply with requests for documents or submitting false, inaccurate, or incomplete evidence of continuing education programs conducted and certificates issued, aiding or abetting a licensee who fails to meet the CE requirement by altering or falsifying certificates. It's really important. If we send you a request for documents, it's going to be a very good reason why we're asking for them, and we ask you don't ignore them, whether it's an email or a letter. Reminder, a CE program director who is an RN or LPN and fails to comply with the requirements in these rules shall be subject to disciplinary action by the board. We don't want to have to do this. Every year after license renewal, there's an automatic audit of a selected number of licensees who are asked to submit documented evidence of meeting the continuing education requirements. And we let you know about this because many times after the audit notice goes out, they're contacting you saying that they attended a class that wasn't transmitted, or we're calling you to verify attendance at a program. Providers' compliance with the rules can be evaluated by the board or its designee by participant evaluations, provider evaluations, which pretty much is your approval for continuation as a provider, random on-site visits, or an audit of provider reports and records. An example of a provider review was in September of 2009. We queried providers with class duplications. We found 69 providers had duplicated class entries ranging from 1 to 1,222 duplications per provider. What was the impact? 645 LPNs thought they had enough hours to renew their license and may have had duplicate hours reported, resulting in total number of hours less than the 24 to renew their license. We did this in September, hoping that we would catch most of them before they renewed their license. We do complaint-generated audits. They follow written complaint by an individual for failure of the provider to meet the criteria for approval. And again, we notify you of the complaint. We ask you to submit requested documents within 30 days of the written request, and failure, of course, to comply may result in sanctions by the board, but we try to call you and remind you that you need to do this. This was an example that we got from a participant. He said, I took the ACLS renewal class from such a provider, ABNP, and gave us the number on the date and in the city. The instructor didn't really teach us anything, and then we took the test together as a group as the instructor gave us the answers. Don't get me wrong, I was happy to pass the class with such a high grade, but I would have rather felt like I learned something since I work in a busy ED and am required to use the ACLS algorithms appropriately. As an approved provider, remember to include the ABNP number on all correspondence and documents with the ABN. Notify the ABN of changes in ownership, personnel, addresses, and phone numbers. Review the rules on a regular basis. Monitor your classes offered under your provider number. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in session 3. Monitor the transmission of classes. Submit your applications and fees timely, and respond promptly to all correspondence from the ABN. For other information on these and other CE rules, you're encouraged to view the entire CE chapter found in ABN Administrative Code, Chapter 610-X-10, And certainly view Session 3 for information on electronic transmission and data management. And for any remaining questions, call me or email me. It's probably the easier way to get to me, carolyn.morgan@abn.state.al.us. Thank you.